sometimes it's not about you, Scott.
In fact, the vast majority of the time, most things are not about me.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore. I'm one of your hosts. I'm joined by Dr. Scott Melson. Hello.
What's up, man?
How are you, sir?
You know what? We adjourned today, and by we I mean the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in a very good space.
You feel it feels like Friday on a Thursday.
It really is, and the thing is, like, it feels like this for us. I can't even imagine how it feels for the members and the staff and the people that work at the Capitol.
Right. Well, and as we will hear later in this episode from Representative Josh West, he talks about, in our interview with him and Representative Marcus McEntire, about what it's like to be away from your family for 4 months for most nights of the week.
I mean, that's crazy, right? Like, he was talking about that, and he works 4 months out of the year farther away from his family than I live from my in-laws, right? Like, it takes less time for Ashley and I to drive to Dallas and see her family than it does for him to drive home from his job on the weekend.
Right.
Right.
It's a hell of a commute.
No, that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, as a preview, yes, here in a few minutes after the news roundup, then we'll have an interview with Josh West and Marcus McEntire. We sat down with them and had a really good talk, and so I'm excited to play that here.
It was great. It was a ton of fun. They were very very generous with their time. I mean, they sat down with us for right at hour and five. So we've got we're recording a little topper here for you, and we will do our best to keep this at about 10-15 minutes for real this time, guys. All right. So we can get you to the good stuff.
We say that every week. Let's get into it.
All right, so the big news this week. First story up is, of course, today is Sine Die, kind of, right? So
I was going to do a drum roll.
Oh.
Scott, what's today?
It's Sine Die.
That was a two-hander. I really had to use both my hands to get all those buttons pushed.
That would have been so great if I had mucked it up.
Well, that's all right.
The legislature adjourned today, adjourned without a date certain, which is what Sine Die means. Now, so they're actually not technically adjourned. They are, I believe, standing at ease or in recess for 5 days, as they have to, right? They can't they can't touch the budget within 5 days of the end of session. They also have to give the governor time to review some bills.
And also they have to give themselves time for him to veto it. And if he vetoed it and they wanted to come back and try to override the veto, they could still do that before the 31st.
Right. So unless some funny business happens, we are probably done seeing legislative activity for this year. However, the official date of Sine Die will be next Friday, the 31st. So we were both wrong. You said you said the 15th. I said the 24th. Which was tomorrow. It's going to be a week later than that.
I will say you were the closest without going over, which is good enough for Bob Barker.
That's right. Price is Right rules is what we live by here. So that's the big news.
Come on down.
We do have some articles for you this week. The first one today, there was a flurry of activity in the legislature in the last 48 hours would be understating it. Yesterday, the House rejected SB 252, which is one of the big criminal justice reform bills that has to do with reforming the process of bail bonds. The House declined. They did not pass that bill. It was a vote. It was very close, 49 to 45.
Yeah, and there were enough members absent that it could have switched the vote.
Yes, it was. It was a really kind of a bizarre situation and surprised a lot of people to see that did not pass.
Especially given how much we've talked about it, and even the governor's talked about it.
Right, it was a real priority for Governor Stitt. And then the next thing that was crazy is then the Senate, and I don't know if this was in retaliation. I don't think so. I've had some there's rumblings, but I don't know anything of what's happened officially. But then the Senate did not even take up House Bill 1269, which was the big it's almost kind of like the omnibus criminal justice reform bill
because the one that makes
State Question 780 retroactive.
Yeah.
So this has implications for people getting out of jail, people that have the
ability for years,
people that have previous felonies can be getting them expunged. This was a big deal. I can't say I know for a fact that there was a ton of behind the scenes work going on this bill.
And it was a foregone conclusion it was going to pass.
Well, right. That's the thing is that everybody knew this was going to pass. The governor was going to sign it. There have been kind of behind the scenes negotiations about exactly what this needed to look like for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. Everybody thought this was a done deal, and then yesterday the Senate's like, nah, we're not going to hear it.
Do you think, Scott, that this was an oversight? It was, sometimes you have something that's important, you're like, I'm going to get to that in a minute, and then you forget, and you're like, oh shit, I forgot about that. Or do you think they held it back in case they needed it as a lever to get something else to happen?
It could have been that. I also think that there were a lot of people behind the scenes lobbying against this bill.
Like the bail bondsmen?
Maybe them, also maybe the DAs. I think there's a lot of people there. DAs council, I think, was not a big fan of this.
So that's what happened with, not with this, but with the other one, right? Where the sheriffs jumped in?
Yeah.
Yesterday?
Yeah, and so...
They've had 4 humping months to get up there.
Right. Well, so it was a bit Twitter was blowing up that this didn't happen yesterday, right? And this is important too because Representative Leader Eccles was one of the main authors on this bill.
Yeah.
So Representative Eccles and Representative Dunnington carried this bill in the state house. Representative Bice carried it in the Senate. So there was a lot of.
That's some influential folks up there.
Yeah. There was a lot of things happening on the social media about this kind of disappointment how this went down. So then today the Senate meets. It's not on their agenda. Okay. They complete their agenda. All the bills that are on the board have either passed or not passed or whatever they're going to do. Looks like they're about to adjourn, and then they recess, right? Governor shows up. Governor's at the Capitol. People are talking. People are milling around. Senate gavels back in. They bring up House Bill 1269. No questions, no debate, vote, pass.
What was the vote?
11 no, 36 I think, or 38 I, something
Who
like that.
voted no?
I haven't looked at the vote. I haven't looked at the vote
was it
yet.
party lines plus 5?
Oh, I wouldn't think so because I wouldn't see the Dems voting against it.
I wouldn't think so either.
Right?
But
Yeah.
So 11 Republicans voted against it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
But anyway, so the two big criminal justice reform bills. One bail did not get done, but state question 780 retroactivity did get done, and that is a big deal. And I hope that we can have.
There was an amendment to it, though, right?
I don't think today.
I thought
there was some stuff done in conference committee.
Right. So it wasn't the original version.
Right. My hope is that we can get a few of the folks that were involved on the show.
We'll have a special
and talk just kind of all about what did and what didn't happen with criminal justice reform this session and what that means moving forward.
And we should do is get Damien from OK Policy and talk to him a little
100%.
bit. Either have him on with someone. We only have 4 mics here, but I'll give up my mic and or have
so selfless.
Have him and then have some of the legislators. I think that'd be a good compare and contrast.
That'd be excellent.
Get Damien and then Kiesel from ACLU or something, and then
we're planning. Look at this. We're planning the show while we're talking to you. How about that?
Scott and I have a list of topics that we're going to do sometime this summer. We got to schedule those.
Got to work out the deets, as they say. But if you want to get all the details on criminal justice reform, check out the piece from Non-Doc today. Another piece. This is an important. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but it is. I think it's important to mention. This is from Non-Doc as well.
Say it's notable, maybe not important.
There you go. Notable. There you go. So we talked a few weeks ago about some allegations that have been made against Representatives Kennedy and McDougal, sexual harassment, inappropriate touching of a female colleague. The House initiated an investigation with outside counsel. That investigation has not been complete, and the attorney was unable to substantiate any of the allegations.
Right. And so, just to recap, again, as we said that day, because we almost didn't talk about it, so now we got to talk about it.
Right.
That Al Gerhardt, the guy who made the allegations, is a former legislator and has made allegations like this in the past and is a bit of a firebrand.
Somewhat.
Definitively a firebrand, I think. And is a pretty far right conservative, I think. It's fair to say.
He writes the Oklahoma Sooner Tea Party newsletter.
Right. And so Kennedy being the guy who ran attack ads against other far-right Republicans, and they all lost in the primary. So I would say it's fair to assume that there is a beef between...
Well, there is definitely beef, and the article actually goes into that. They have a lot of documentation about kind of the relationship between Mr. Gerhardt and some of these representatives. There's some phone calls, some transcripts. They talked
to the alleged victims who all denied everything happened. They didn't name who it was, but she said...
No, the alleged victim did not deny anything happened. She still is saying like something happened. But
really?
Yeah, but
Did I misread that?
Yeah, all of the witnesses are the accused, and the witnesses deny that anything happened. The alleged victim says that something did happen, but there was purported to be some evidence, and apparently there is not.
Interesting. Okay, well, I totally misread that. I'm glad you corrected me. I'm going to go back and read that article again. Listeners,
it says all parties were cooperative with the investigation. Ultimately, the details provided by the complainant diverged significantly from the details provided by the accused and the witnesses.
So the complainant is Gerhardt.
Yes, but those details diverge significantly from the details provided by the accused,
McDougal and Kennedy,
not the accuser, and the witnesses. The accused and the witnesses maintain that no video was ever shown to the complaining party and that they were not aware of anyone touching anyone, etc.
So in that case, the complaining party makes me think it would be...
It's the representative who was involved.
The woman,
yes.
Not... Okay.
Yeah.
So... Because there was allegations that one of them showed her a porn video while at a restaurant or something, which sounds preposterous.
Yeah. So it's very like, it's just, you go on and read the article. I think you read it the way that I read it the first time. I was like, wait, so the accuser says that this didn't happen?
Right.
And it was the accused, not the accuser.
No, I read it as the complainant being Gerhardt, not the complainant being the female representative. Anyway,
so that's up for your purview on non-doc.
I guess and the reason it was in national news is because there were like New York Times reporters in town that day, and Gerhardt was like calling representatives like, "Hey, the New York Times guys here. We got to talk about this today."
Yes. Yep.
Which also seems suspicious, but
just a smidge, a tad.
Anyway,
scotch.
Can I just say, just be cool, people. Like, first of all, don't touch people unless they ask for it. Right? Like, just be normal, have conversations, you can have friendships, you can have professional relationships. You ain't got to touch them, right? You can live above reproach. Also, don't accuse people of things that they don't do. I'm not privy to all the details of this case. I'm just saying in general, can't we all just get along?
Agreed.
Can't we all just get along? All right. So up next is an update on the opioid settlement. Scott, a fun fact that you told me before we started recording, out of all the state agencies who received funding this year that was appropriated by the legislature, which state agency saw a decrease?
Can you do your drum roll again? The Attorney General's Office.
That's right. I'll give you the applause for that as well. Indeed. So only one state agency that's appropriated saw a decrease. It was the AG's office.
Why, Andy, why would that have happened?
Because the legislature is petty, Scott. That's why. Because the only...
I think they would disagree with you.
No, well, I think they would say it was a measured response. I would say that in my opinion, they decreased their budget perhaps as a punitive measure because they didn't like something the AG did that at the time was perfectly legal. However, they've now passed a law to make it illegal.
Yes, that is...
Or make it just not possible, right?
Yes, that
is... So the Attorney General, Mike Hunter, who we had on the show several weeks ago, had this settlement with opioid manufacturer Purdue Pharmaceuticals, and part of that settlement he arranged was, to set up a fund, right, or for the money to go to OSU for treatment and all
research, and whatnot.
We talked about that a lot. I'm sure everyone listens to this knows about it. So in response, the legislature today, right, passed a law that says that henceforth, any AG, Hunter or otherwise in the future, if they sue somebody and they get a settlement of any kind, all that money goes into the General Revenue Fund, which is what the legislature appropriates.
To be appropriated by the legislature.
Right. They're just like, no, you can't decide where the money goes. We decide where the money goes.
Yeah. They were a bit peeved.
They were. It is funny to me. I'll just perfectly candid. Like, it is funny to me how peeved the legislature gets. All of them. I'll say both sides of the aisle.
Oh yeah.
They get peeved when anybody infringes on their turf. They're just, wait, that is our job. And I would argue. I mean, yet again, that the AG is elected independently. Is he part of the judiciary? He's not part of the judiciary, is he?
He is the chief law enforcement officer for the state of Oklahoma.
Right. So of the three branches, which one would you put him under?
Oh, he's part of the executive branch.
Okay, that's what I would think. But he's not appointed, and so
No, he's like state superintendent.
Right. So I guess it's part of the executive because he carries out the law in some degree. But I just think that like the legislature definitely wants to be the most powerful branch.
Well, I think in this case, what I've heard a lot of them say is, look, when you get right down to it, their actual only constitutional responsibility is to appropriate funds. Like, that's like...
What about passing laws?
I mean, they do that, but like...
But that's what... No one else can pass laws.
Yeah, it's true. But... it's true. But they, like, their main, like, power of kind of enforcing what they want to do is the power of the purse, right? The judiciary has their power. The executive has their power. The power of the purse is what's vested in the legislature. And they see this situation in particular as like having usurped that.
Right. And that's a good use of that word.
So, I mean, I think like if, it's kind of like, now, I mean, that's not a great example. I was like, if I don't know, if like the courts, I mean, think about how like pissy they get, like if the court says something they do is like unconstitutional, right?
Because they pass unconstitutional laws.
Well,
I'm just a layman, and I can tell them that. Like some of this stuff,
I think they know that too. Actually,
figured you for a dumb shit. But
I love your voice.
I think that no, the other deal. I think part of it is that the entire state budget of Oklahoma is like 22 million, something like that, or billion?
Billion with a B.
So, but 20 something billion?
They appropriate about 40% of it.
Yeah, so they only, out of $22 billion, they only get to spend like $8 billion, right? And because there's all these things that come off the top, because there have been previous measures that just said like, you don't get to appropriate this. This money is dedicated to this source.
What would you spend $8 billion on?
Me?
Yeah.
Mostly like backpacks and nice booze, I think.
That's fair enough.
I have a fascination with bags.
That's you were texting about that earlier.
I got one in the mail today. I'll show you after I'm very excited.
I'm excited. All right, so check this out. This is on News OK. The legislature is cracking the whip on the attorney general and where money that they receive in settlements has to go.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I think we'll see this as an ongoing thing, particularly because the opioid lawsuits will be coming to the next month, right?
Next week.
Next week, okay.
Yeah, so
and
go
so
to court on the 28th.
Man, and
Tuesday.
So I think if those trials result in bankruptcy and people don't get anything, Hunter will be vindicated, right? However, because he didn't join on to some of the other states' lawsuits, and so if other states settle for like billions of dollars and we didn't get that, then the legislature is going to be like, man, we told you.
Yeah.
It's not cool.
I suspect if that happens, he'll have a hard time with re-election.
It's possible he'll get challenged by someone else from his party, I'm certain. So, all right. And then our last article for today is Governor Stitt tells Tulsa Republicans that he, quote, has to get in front of Medicaid initiative.
Yes. So this happened last Friday. This is Governor Stitt spoke to the Tulsa Republican Club and just comes out and says Medicaid expansion is probably going to be on the ballot. We have the left kind of pushing that. I've got to come out in front of that and give people an option A. I'm afraid Medicaid expansion would pass if it went out to a vote of the people today. He is correct. Without some kind of alternative plan, I would actually submit to him that depending on the alternative plan, it might pass anyway. He says he's got a healthcare expert who is unnamed working on a conservative plan, not clear what that is, that protects the taxpayer to make sure we can say here's the right way to deliver services. I don't know that we need to say too much more about this, mostly because we talked with Representatives McEntire and West.
Yeah.
At length about this.
So you'll hear that here in a minute. And we'll also we're going to do a episode about,
yeah. And I think to me, the reason this is important is because this is this is really like things are converging, right? Like it is clear that the legislature and the governor's office know that like if you held a vote on Medicaid expansion in Oklahoma today, it would pass. And they have
and there's a ballot initiative that's been filed.
Yeah, and that's like, and there's some people suing to try and stop it, but we'll see what happens with that. But you know, they know it's going to happen. They are, I think many in the legislature are a little bit peevish about medical marijuana.
This is the second time this episode we've used the word peeved or peevish.
Peevish, because they didn't do anything on medical marijuana. Then it went to the people and it passed, and the legislature kind of sees themselves as having to come back in and like clean that up a lot. And I can just tell you from conversations we've had with a lot of people that if Medicaid expansion passes, I think it is extremely likely that the legislature is going to come back and hear, or they're going to come back and do some things to kind of try and modify how it looks in Oklahoma.
They're hoping they can pass something in advance of the ballot initiative to take the bullets out of the gun.
Right. Well, because they want to try and defeat the ballot initiative. But they also know that if the ballot initiative passes, they are going to come back and try and do some things to change how it works. And they don't want the headlines that we've seen out of Utah and like I think Nevada and like maybe Maine. There's been several states all over the country where Medicaid expansion has passed, and then, and I'm just stating facts here, Republican-controlled legislatures have come back and significantly modified it, and there's like national headlines about the legislature, the party, like ignoring, quote, the will of the people. I think that some of those legislatures would argue it's not that we're ignoring the will of the people, it's that like the way this passed is for reasons we think is just like not workable. That's what I think our legislators here in Oklahoma would say.
Yeah.
But they don't want to deal with that storyline, accurate or not. Now, I maintain that if the version of like healthcare expansion that they come up with is something that's like not actually healthcare expansion,
right?
Then the bill, like the ballot initiative, is going to pass anyway. But talking with Representative West, talking with Representative McEntire, you know, I think it sounds to me like they're pursuing some strategies that might be reasonable, that might work well. We don't know what they're going to come up with yet.
But here's what's going to happen, Scott, is that we are going to have two different groups that have significant pride and perhaps ego resilience, the legislature, and then the groups that are pursuing this ballot initiative. And it's going to come down to like, well, we passed this, why don't you back down, right? So right now there's a ballot initiative that they could let roll out, but their pride won't let them do that, right? And maybe their prudence, perhaps. Pride and Prudence, that's the name of my book.
Pride and Prudence.
But they
don't often go together.
Wouldn't be prudent. But they're not going to do it. So
that is a deep, like what, like 1996 SNL reference?
No, it's from Bush 1, so that's like 88.
That is.
Not going to do it. Wouldn't be prudent. It's Dana Carvey.
Wow,
what happened to Dana after?
Okay, we're getting sidetracked.
We are.
Pride and Prudence.
Yeah. So anyway, that's their thing. But let's say the legislature passes some kind of expansion, or mini expansion, and so it's then them versus the folks that have already filed and done the work for the ballot initiative. If they've already gotten all the signatures and all that kind of stuff by then, and it's on the ballot,
they're still going to run it, right?
Well, then they just gotta. Then it's either they put in money for ads or they don't. But like either way, it's on the ballot. And
right. Well, and I mean, a lot of the money from ballot initiatives, like a lot of the cost, is getting the signatures, right? So, like if they've already,
not as much as you think.
I mean, if they put in $500,000 or $1 million to get the signatures, I mean that's
but then
you're talking 2 or 3 million more in ads, maybe more. But if you've spent $1 million, are you gonna?
This is two guys who don't have $1 million. We're like, if you spend $1 million, why not spend $4 million? I'll tell you why. It's $3 million. That's why not.
It's not my money. I mean, I think you're right. That's definitely one conflict that's going to get set up here. But I think another one though, and this gets a little bit to a conversation that we had with the representatives about the makeup of the legislature and specifically the Republican caucus. I'm interested to see what kind of Medicaid expansion you can come up with that's going to get right, because you need 51 votes in the House, right?
Yeah,
and they got 70. They got 76. So
I mean, yeah. So
they can afford to lose 25.
The Republicans can pass it on their own in both chambers,
right? And they can lose 25 of their own to do it. But like, what healthcare expansion do you come up with that gets 51 Republicans?
Insure Oklahoma. You just expand the program we already have.
Do you think? I mean, you think that does it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the alternative is do nothing and then have a ballot initiative that goes through.
Maybe it does, but you know what that means, right? Like, if you do that, that puts 51 Republicans that are running for re-election on taking Obamacare money.
Oh well, yeah, but it polls so highly that they could say we expanded healthcare for more Oklahomans. Like
it polls really highly.
It's all about positioning.
It polls really highly when you poll the state, right?
Right.
But it polls really highly because there's like 3 places in the state that are really in favor of it, right? Tulsa's really in favor of it. Oklahoma City's really in favor of it. When you get into some of the rural districts, it looks a little bit different, and it depends.
That's fair.
It depends district to district. And I'm just saying, you might have a hard time, right? Like, right? There's 51. There's 51 Republicans that are going to have to go for this, and they're going to go home, and some of them are going to get primaried, and the primary ads are going to say Representative so-and-so voted to expand Obamacare and take Obamacare money and raise your taxes. So that's not true, but that's what the ad's going to say.
Right. So if they were smart, what they would do is pass it with an emergency clause so that it goes into place before the election, right? So if they pass it, well, for sure in a special session, but even if they pass it in a regular session next year and they did an emergency clause, so it would go into effect in June, right?
Right.
Then in those rural areas where most people would be eligible for it, you would have given your constituents insurance.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
They asked me, so I told them to do.
That's some brilliant strategy that you've got there, and I don't disagree with it.
It's strategy.
The reason that I'm bringing it up is because the question that's bubbling up to me, and the answer to this, I mean, I will state right now, the answer to this may be yes, they can do it, no problem at all. But what I'm wondering is, can they craft a plan that can pass that does not require Democratic support? Can they pass a healthcare expansion that doesn't need the Dems?
Well,
because if it needs the Dems,
they won't give it to them.
Unless they make it something that the Dems are happy with, right?
Yeah, but I think the Dems are in the reverse position where the Democrats, if they don't vote for it, so like their constituents are the opposite, right? Like they would be then on the record as voting against expanding healthcare.
Right, except that their constituents want complete, unrestricted, ACA-style Medicaid.
But what if it doesn't? What if the ballot initiative doesn't pass, right? Like you had the chance.
Yeah, but it will.
Yeah, but what if it doesn't? Like it's all hypotheticals.
It is. It's just
they were like, you could have given us healthcare,
right?
Because you could, if that's the case, constituents could say, if they paid close attention, you could have voted for this and given us health care, and then the initiative would have passed anyway, and we would have got more health care.
No,
I mean, that's
no, I totally, I agree with what you're saying. I'm just bringing it up because I think, I mean, it's like everything else. Like this is going to come down to what the politics are, and I could be totally wrong, but I just wonder if the politics are maybe a little more complicated than, oh, well, we're just going to pass something next year and take the teeth out of the ballot initiative, so it's like not a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But
it
may be that straightforward that they pass into Oklahoma and that's all she wrote. Like I think that's what they're aiming for. Yeah, and that may be.
I think that's the best option that they have available to them.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I guess my question is, will that be enough?
Oh, right.
You know,
only time will tell.
Before we leave, one thing I was going to plug. We try not to plug other podcasts on the show, but
no, it's not true. We talk about them all the
time. So we have talked about, we had, it's been close to a year ago. We had Solicitor General Mithun Monsicani on to talk about this really interesting case, Carpenter v. Murphy, at the Supreme Court, that is dealing with a double murder, a double homicide that happened on
Indian country,
on an Indian nation here in Oklahoma, and that has been argued before the Supreme Court. And depending on what the court decides, has the possibility of, I mean, drastically like rewriting how like the definition of like what Indian Territory is and what it means and nation. Like it is a huge case. If you find that interesting and you would like to know more about it, Crooked Media, which, full disclosure, Crooked Media, unlike us, they are not a nonpartisan nonprofit.
No, not remotely.
They are a very partisan for-profit media company. It is a media company that was started by several former Obama staffers, and they have a variety of projects. But they have a new project that's coming out, I think, next week or maybe at the first week of June, called In This Land. So this is a podcast that features it's hosted by a native Oklahoman, Cherokee woman. She's a writer and author. And it delves. It's a very deep dive into this case, Carpenter v. Murphy, the background of the case, what happened, what the kind of the details of the legal arguments are, and what the implications will be depending on what the court decides. So,
do we know when we're supposed to hear a hearing on this?
By the end of term, one thinks.
Which is,
I mean, it was argued in February.
Right. So when does that term end?
Like August, maybe?
I'm scrolling on SCOTUS blog here.
But yeah, but I like I said, it hasn't, it has not, the podcast has not come out yet. But it will debut on June 3rd, and it's like I said, it's hosted by Rebecca Nagel, who is a journalist from here in Oklahoma. She's based out of Oklahoma, and she's also a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. So if you want to, support one of our own and learn more about something that has the potential to drastically change how some things work here in Oklahoma, you should check out This Land by Crooked Media.
Interesting. It's free. You don't have to actually
you don't have to pay for it,
right?
You have to pay. There's just ads.
All right. Well, with that, let's go listen to our interview with Representative Josh West and Marcus McEntire. All right, and we're back from our break. We are joined now by Representative Josh West. Hello, sir.
How are you? Thanks for having me.
From District 5, House District 5. That's up in northeast Oklahoma.
It is, about as far northeast as you can get.
All right. And also Representative Marcus McEntire from District 50.
Which is southwestern Oklahoma.
That's right. You guys have really split the state there.
Yeah, you got Duncan and Grove.
Yeah.
Right. I saw both those towns on the news yesterday as we watched the storms roll through and not rain at my house.
Representative West, we were talking this morning. It sounds like your family had to take cover there for a minute last night, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was late night. We kind of sit around, a group of us last night, watching the news, and throughout the day, it was expecting it here. But as the storms progressed northeast, middle of the night, 11 o'clock at night, I'm trying to find out. My wife's not answering my call, and so I don't even know my home phone. So I'm trying to look up my home phone, and I'm watching the news out of Tulsa. And as these storms were tracking northeast, it came up through southern Delaware County, was kind of headed our way. And I got a hold of her and I said, "Hey, you guys need to get in the cellar." So but it kind of went to the bottom half of my district. So Leach, a small community there in southern Delaware County, was hit pretty good, and small tornado, but it was mostly trees and things like that. There was some damage to buildings and stuff, but
Sure.
Representative McEntire, all your folks are all okay?
We were relatively unscathed. So I was watching it. I don't know if you saw Twitter feed. Trace Savage put a picture of us all watching weather radar when we were in JCAB.
Yeah.
And that's what we were looking at. We were just saying our family's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So.
What's funny, I was outside. Sean Wallace and Amanda Ewing, if you guys know them, they work at the Capitol. They live across the street from me. And so Sean and I were out standing in the middle of the street last night talking about it. And he was like, I said, "Did you get off work early?" And he's like, "Yeah, I mean, they're still in session." So he came home to put the trash out and was going to go back up there. And it was a weird day. I mean, I think especially having folks from across the state here today to talk about it, very different experience for people in Grove than us in the city, or certainly down in Duncan.
I'm born and raised in Oklahoma. And I've been here 35 years. I don't freak out about weather, but they had me nervous yesterday.
You were nervous yesterday.
I was. There were sphincters tightening yesterday that normally are.
We call that down south being puckered.
Nice. We actually, Fegler and I have an acquaintance that's a storm chaser, I think for Channel 4. And so the night before, when the news put out, this is going to be a big outbreak. And so we called him up and we said, "Hey, you think we can get out with you? And he's like, no, it's not a. He's
not
like,
one of those.
He's like, I've been doing this for however many years, and I'm not looking forward to tomorrow.
Yeah.
So we thought it was going to be a lot worse than it was. And I guess, I'm glad that we didn't, especially here, but throughout the state, man, there were tons of tornadoes.
Yeah, and it could have been a lot worse, right? I mean, I think the guys, the National Weather Service, they do a tremendous job. It's not an easy job, and they were all staring down the pipe at a very difficult forecast that said, like, we don't know exactly when or where, but it's going to be a lot and everywhere. Yeah. And so just be aware, right, for like the next 24 hours. And I went to bed when it was raining and woke up and it was still raining.
Well, and it's just too, it's something we talked about before because, we're both data nerds, right? But like people, like sometimes it's hard to have kind of a good grasp of like probabilities and what they mean, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think sometimes people think that like, if something's a 70% chance, like it means like it's a sure thing, right? Or if it's a 40% chance, like they said yesterday, I think it was a 45% chance of a major tornado within like 25 miles of the metro area, that's not like a very big, that's not a very big probability. And I would just remind you that in October of 2016, there was a 30% chance Donald Trump was going to be president of the United States. So stuff that has only a 30-40% chance of happening happens all the time.
You don't like Trump?
That wasn't a comment on the president. That was just saying. So that's a lower probability events, or what seems lower, they still happen.
People play the lottery all the time with a very, very low chance of winning.
But I think that the people in Mangum or wherever last night, Kingfisher, they would say, hey, I think they pretty much nailed it.
Right.
He just went a little further north.
Yeah. Pfeiffer's area.
Yeah, he's right around Stillwater.
And that storm,
he's from Orlando.
Yeah, Orlando. Yeah.
That storm outside of Mangum, that was like,
that was crazy.
That was a bad storm.
Yeah. All right. Well, since we're already talking about districts, Representative West, tell us a little bit about District 5, what the makeup is, and
so District 5, like I said, far northeast, and my district actually joins Arkansas, joins Missouri, and I'm probably Ben Loring and Ben's in between me and Kansas, so real close to 3 of the states, and it's rural. We do have Grand Lake. That's kind of the makeup. It's kind of like it's hard to explain. So you've got Grand Lake. That's where my Republicans are, and then the further south you go outside of Grand Lake, it becomes more Democrat. And so my makeup, as far as politically, is about 51% Republican, 48% Democrat, and then 1% whatever. And so it's hard to explain. They're Eastern. I went with first time I met Scott was last Friday. I stayed here, and my wife met me here Saturday. But I went to Jason Dunnington's a good friend of ours and mine, and so we were sitting around after session, and he stopped by and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" He said, "I have a weekly constituent roundup. Would you like to come?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, sure." So and I do like to get the other outlooks from around the state, and so I was talking Friday about my makeup, and it's funny, it's the typical Eastern side Democrats. They're very blue dog and really conservative, and so I was trying to explain that during Dunnington's get together with his constituents about the kind of the difference in Democrats here in the city and Democrats where I'm from. But I remember the last campaign, I had to come down here and I had to pick up. So I was out of push cards, and so I met the guy who did my push cards for me. And I was driving. It was one of your. It was a pretty fancy neighborhood here in the city, and I'm driving through there, and they all had Drew Edmondson signs. And this was right before the general. And when I would drive through my areas, they're all Stitt signs, and so it's kind of funny to see that urban, rural, the difference. But it's just a rural district. We do have Grand Lake, and so tourism is a huge part of my district. And then outside of tourism, we have aerospace and that type of industry, but it's a lot of agriculture and farming, and a great place.
So what are some of the major towns up there? Is Veneta in your district?
It's not. So that's Rusty Cornwell. So he replaced Chuck Hoskins. So I joined Rusty. Grove's my biggest town. It's not a city. It's about, it goes from about probably 8,500 people to, it depends, in the summertime, we gain about 50,000 people overnight with
Grand Lake,
Grand Lake, and so.
Interesting.
Is Pitcher in your district?
It's not. That's Ben's district. That's Ben Loring's district.
Just throwing out city names.
Well, Pitcher's an interesting story.
Yeah.
You have Jay.
It's Grove J. It's you talk based on population. So I look at I talked to some of these representatives from the urban areas, and their district may be 4 square miles. Well, mine's 860 square miles. So Grove J, Salina.
But the same number of people, though. Same
number of people,
constituents.
just really spread out.
Right.
But my 3 major schools are Grove J and Salina. And then you got towns like Cleora and Ketchum and Langley and Disney and Hoodow and Wickliffe and Kenwood and Uchi and Leech. And
do you find, like, in a district like that has so many small towns, do they each, I would assume they do they each have kind of their own character, like their own kind of flavor? Like Oklahoma City, right? There's a ton of people here, but you can go from one neighborhood to the next, and it's a very, like, different vibe, I guess. Is it similar?
I guess you could say that. They're very, especially when you talk about getting into schools, I mean, very, that is the makeup of that town. So I always talk about, there's always talk up here at some point about consolidation. And I guess that's kind of that urban-rural fight, because I have all these small towns with their schools. And so, I mean, each town's got their own little unique qualities, but it's still rural Oklahoma. But it's just, I would love to have, they need to start back. They used to, years ago, they'd have an adopt a rep program. And so an urban rep would come to a rural legislative area for a few days, and then vice versa. And so it's just different. It's very personal being from a rural district, because people know me. I was born and raised there, and I'm just Josh. I'm just West. And so, my wife, after my kids are young, they're 12, 11, 6, and 4. And so last year during Halloween, we're trick-or-treating. My wife goes, "You cannot come with us anymore," because everyone wants to, right? They may not know who the governor is or the president, but they know Josh just because they were born and raised there. And so and that affects, I always, even my voting, that's, I got to go back home and people know me, and so they don't have an issue calling me. And that's a great thing about being like I said, a rural representative, because they have my personal cell phone, or they see me at church or at ball games or at school functions or the grocery store. And so it's a different type of serving. It's just different between rural and
no, we don't have anonymity. I wouldn't say that we're many celebrities or anything, but most everybody knows who we are in a rural district, and they will not hesitate to call you up.
Right.
A lot of the urban legislators will say, basically we have to work really hard because we have so many constituents contacting us, where they're pretty much anonymous. I mean, they can go to, Mike Osborne can be in Edmond and go to Walmart and people not know who he is.
Right, sure.
If I go to Walmart and I don't want to be seen, I'm put on a ball cap and sunglasses.
Or you go at midnight.
I wonder if part of that too is
or Sunday morning.
I think the different kind of just the way the communities are set up lends itself to that. But I wonder if it's also because Mike Osborne might go to Walmart and that Walmart might not even be in his district, right? Like you might because the population is so much more concentrated, you're probably crossing district a lot more than you guys might in a more rural district.
I think that may be a variable. I think that the other thing is it's harder for them to message, because the Daily Oklahoman is not going to publish one of their articles. If I send an article to my news outlets, all those papers are going to usually publish that. And so, like with Facebook and things like that, it's just everybody knows who you are and they're paying attention.
Well, there's even you and your wife acquired a business or something recently. I saw the article from the Duncan Banner Press here, and I was like, hey, I know that guy. Yeah. And it occurred to me that's like, I don't know if it's front page news, but the Banner Press is a great paper, not a huge paper, and so the fact that they would report on that where we don't have that here for our folks.
Yeah, it was on like the third page, but we have a business already there in Duncan, and we ended up buying her family's insurance agency, which I'm running now, and my wife still runs distinctivedecor.com.
Yeah.
So Duncan, your house district 50.
Yes.
And Duncan, kind of like Grove is the largest town in your district, Josh. So Duncan would be yours.
Absolutely.
And how many people live in Duncan now?
25,000.
Halliburton still is the major.
Halliburton, of course, that's the birthplace of Halliburton, and they're still the largest employer. Absolutely. It's changed a lot in Duncan. Used to have a lot of the white collar professionals in Duncan, and then when they merged with another company, they ended up moving a lot of people out of Duncan into Houston. So we still have a lot of the field camp stuff and all of the manufacturing there. There's still some engineers there, but for the most part, like the financial side of it is in Houston. But it's still the largest employer, and the second would be Duncan Regional Hospital.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I lived in a town in South Texas, central South Texas, Brenham, home of Bluebell ice cream, and also the baseball capital of Texas and the Blue Bond capital of Texas. We had lots of claims to fame.
Apparently.
It was a cool place, but it was about the same size as Duncan. And I'd been to Duncan a number of times, and it reminded me of that I worked at a state facility for people with developmental disabilities, and that was the largest employer. And the second was the regional hospital, and then like Walmart was the third. Mm-hmm. And so pretty much everyone knew everybody because someone's brother and sister worked at two of those three places.
That's correct.
That's like up here, you get into any legislation that has to do with hospitals or schools. Those are my two biggest employers in my hometown. And so, when with the Wildcat last year, I don't get a lot of visitors. I'm 220 miles away, and so a lot of the teachers that were down at the Capitol were teachers that taught me as a kid. And so, or when I have when there's any kind of legislation that has to do with healthcare, I've got my hospital president on the phone saying, "Hey, I don't necessarily I don't care how this is going to affect Oklahoma City or Tulsa. What's it going to do for rural Oklahoma?" And so it's schools and hospitals, and then like with I don't have a Halliburton, but we have an aerospace industry, and so
yeah.
Hey, did you know, this is an interesting fact about Josh West District? Aren't Oscars made?
They are. So
like the trophy?
Yes,
the trophy. So there's a
that's fascinating.
Few major awards that are made out in my industrial park. I won't say the name of the business, but yeah, it's pretty awesome place.
Well, that's cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I want to go dumpster diving for the ones that got right.
Yeah,
someone's face was melted, and I'll take it.
So I think we've kind of touched on an issue from both of you guys that would be a good place to kind of transition, and that's talking about the largest kind of employers in your district, right? You both mentioned some industry, but also both of you talked about hospitals and schools. And I want to ask you a little bit about hospitals. One thing that's been heard, we talked a lot about. I think you guys both know I'm a primary care doctor by day.
I did not know that. Thank you for letting me know.
when I'm not obsessively following Twitter for politics, I'm a primary care doctor, and so I've talked a lot about the potential for healthcare expansion and Medicaid expansion here in Oklahoma, and there's been some bills. I know Representative McEntire, you had a bill looking at healthcare expansion, right?
With Senator Greg McCourtney.
Yeah,
we had him on to talk about that.
Friend of the show, great guy. There's a ballot initiative that's been filed to look at healthcare expansion in Oklahoma that they're shooting to try and get on a 2020 ballot. So as legislators who, you're both Republicans, and I think would class. I'm not meaning to speak for you, but also representing rural districts that are seeing an epidemic of hospitals closing throughout the country and here in Oklahoma. What are your thoughts, feelings about healthcare expansion?
Well, and McEntire can talk. He's definitely the subject matter expert on this. And we obviously knew this was coming. Now McEntire and Senator McCourtney, they had the foresight, last year to start looking at doing research on this, and so they dug into it. And so when I have, about 2 months ago. So the history with McEntire, before we get into this, is when we first we obviously got elected in 2016, and we went through, the regular session, 2 special sessions, and another regular session. And so, but when we got elected, I didn't know Marcus, and so he sends me a text, and when the seating assignments came out, and he said, "Hey," it's like, awesome. And so I didn't think I was going to have anything in common with him. And
you're like, do you want to braid our hair too? Is that
yeah. So definitely my best friend up here, and it helps having him. That's definitely an expertise of his. But I started, using kind of some talking points from Marcus, trying to get out in front of this. We knew the state question. As Republicans, it's obviously we don't. I think our class came in with a different mindset. A lot of us were younger. We had kids in school, and so we want to we look at things a little different than the past. Maybe some of our predecessors, but started kind of getting out and talking to some of my far right groups in the district and saying, hey, there's going to be a state question, and we know it's if you believe in polls, then it's got a good chance of passing. And so my message to them was, we can do nothing, or you can have a constitutional on a ballot measure that will change the Constitution, and I won't have a say as a legislature. So what do you want me to do? And 95% have said, we want you guys to do something to basically head off the state coast, just fix it. And so that's kind of where we started out in my district when I'm talking about this. And so I Governor Stitt talked about a few weeks ago that, he didn't support the ballot measure, but he is looking at a plan B. And so Marcus can kind of
Well, I just want to give the listeners an idea. So Josh, how tall are you? Like 6'4", 6'3"?
6'3", yeah.
Okay. So Josh is 6'3". I'm 5'6.5". And Josh always has a scowl on his face, and I'm always smiling. So, it's kind of an odd couple, but we've become fast friends, and we hang out together all the time.
He would edit my op-eds for me, and he would keep me out of trouble on the floor when I wanted to maybe do some stuff. I'm kind of an aggressive, I'm a military guy, and so my outlook is, I'm not hostile, but I just...
If you got something to say,
you're looking for a fight all the time, Wes.
Yeah, not necessarily. I don't think I'm looking for a fight. There's only so much I can handle this, and then at some point, so he would, I did a debate one time, and I was going to say, I was referring to some colleagues, and it was a certain sector that a lot of them aren't here, but that point was, they talk about the need for smaller government. However, they continue to run for offices when they leave here, and so my point was, you can't get off the government tit. And he goes, you can't say tit on the air. You need to change that to teat. And so,
true story. That's a true story.
That's a good note, though.
No, but it's good to have, because obviously we're not. I don't know. We talked about this after our first year because I thought we were so different. He goes, we're not that different, Wes. And so, but it helps having a different opinion and somebody that has graded papers in a university to help me with my op-eds.
You guys are just
you're a professor?
Well, I taught at University of Virginia. I was working on my PhD at University of Virginia. I taught sociology of religion and law.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and I'm like ABD.
Okay.
Now, so all but dissertation for those of you who don't know what that means. But so we were talking about healthcare. I think the polls are really telling on Medicaid expansion, and as a Republican, the ballot initiative is suboptimal. I mean, because if something goes into the Constitution, the likelihood of us being able to change that, number one, just by the constraints of the Constitution, the number of votes you have to have, or the sending it to the ballot to change it is very difficult.
Sure.
And if you try to change anything like that, people are going to say you're overturning the will of the people. So having Medicaid expansion in our Constitution like that really makes it where it's unamendable. Mm-hmm. Not only that, a full state plan which is what the ballot initiative would be. That's hard. That you can't hardly amend that anyway with CMS at the federal government.
Right.
So it's a double whammy to have it in the Constitution. And I don't know if the people behind that ballot initiative use that to their advantage, because it's just like double harsh.
Right. I would assume they want it in there where it can't be touched.
Right. And so as a Republican, I'm trying to navigate this, trying to figure it out, because I firmly believe that we need to increase access to healthcare in Oklahoma. In a rural district, many, I would say majority of the people who are going to see a doctor are on Medicaid or need to be, maybe working poor. And I've seen too many stories in my district where somebody gets a raise of $500 a year and they're kicked off Sooner Care or Medicaid. Right. And then they have to go out and try to buy a private insurance policy, and it puts them into poverty.
Yeah.
And so, that's where I'm coming from. And so what I'm looking at is how can we increase access to healthcare, get that federal money, that 9-to-1 match, because that will revolutionize our budget. Mm-hmm. It will completely revolutionize. And it's just silly that we have not done it,
right?
That we have not used in some fashion. So I advocate for waivers, because waivers allow you not to skirt the rules, but allows you to do some things that we can actually measure outcomes on. We can amend if we make a mistake or if the cost gets too high. All of those things, we could not do that with the ballot initiative. So waivers are kind of a unique way and an enterprising way to tailor something to the state of Oklahoma, because the expansion is completely a one-size-fits-all.
So just so people that are listening know, when you say waiver, what you mean is instead of just saying, yes, we're going to take Medicaid as it exists, Sooner Care as it exists in Oklahoma, and we're just going to expand it using this money. What a waiver is going to CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services at the federal level, and saying, hey, federal government, we want the cash, but we want to do it maybe in a little bit different way that we feel like better suits the needs of people of Oklahoma. Will you give us an exception to do it this way rather than what's prescribed in the ACA, also known as Obamacare?
Right. So, I mean, a waiver is just that. It helps you waive the rules to the ACA to come up with your own plan that will benefit Oklahomans and that you hope you can tailor.
So, as one of the legislators that's kind of taken the lead on this, and if you can say, and you may not be able to because, session's not over and there's next year and all kinds of stuff, but to the extent that you can, what does an Oklahoma specific system look like?
Well, first of all, we'd want to be able to help stimulate the economy with that extra money. So we would probably offer the expansion population. That's to 138% of the poverty level. We would probably use an existing structure like Insure Oklahoma and put those people into private healthcare plans. That's where we would look. So they would get a good healthcare plan.
So the dollars would be like premium support or subsidies to buy something.
Subsidies. Okay. It would be subsidies. Insure Oklahoma works now, which I use.
Yeah, it's a good program.
Yeah, but it's really underutilized.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 or 3 single moms who work in our store in Duncan, and it just is perfect.
Right, because it helps businesses. So as the employer, you can kind of buy into it and still provide insurance at a discounted rate. And there's also an individual version where, like, if you're self-employed or if your employer doesn't offer anything, you can still go get insurance. And it's I have a number of patients that have used it for years. The ACA has kind of cut into it some, but it's been, all things considered, a pretty decent plan.
Yeah, and also, I mean, it's something that's attractive to a Republican who wants to vote on something like this. And instead of it just being a pure subsidy, you have a product that people have a little skin in the game on.
With the
with premium or whatnot.
Right. So with the proposal that you had, would it require people to be working in order to qualify, or is there any kind of caveat for folks who are very low income otherwise?
Yeah, there would be caveats for that. But, I mean, by and large, we've already passed work requirements.
Right.
I actually voted against them, one of the few Republicans that did.
Can I just say, God bless you?
Well, to me, until access to healthcare is actually increased and we have more people there, it doesn't make fiscal sense to me to put work requirements on it at this point.
I agree. I don't just, there's the soapbox of mine, so I'm just going to indulge myself here for a second. But, like, the thing with me with work requirements is, like, I'm a Democrat, I'm a progressive, right? But, like, I can wrap my head around the idea of work requirements. Like, I can see, like, you don't want people taking advantage of the system. You want to make sure that people who need this are really the people that need it, right? Like, so I can get that. I think that the thing that frustrates me with a policy like work requirements is that, in my job, I have to use the best available evidence and data to make decisions about what I'm going to do, right? Like, if you bring your kiddo to me and they've got an ear infection, I have, like, evidence that I'm supposed to follow about what antibiotic they should be on and how long and what dose, et cetera, right? And the thing about work requirements is that, and I've looked at the literature pretty extensively on this, like, so far, everywhere they've been implemented, they increase cost, they create an additional level of bureaucracy, they deprive people of benefits, so it's like bigger government that's less efficient, that costs more. And so the thing that drives me a little bit nuts, and obviously I know you voted against it, so I'm preaching to the choir.
I was one of the, I'm very much a minority.
I voted for it.
It's preaching to the choir. I'm wagging my finger at you.
That's all right.
Is that, like, it's something that, like, if you're a conservative Republican, like, why support a policy that's going to increase cost, increase bureaucracy, and make the underlying program less effective? It's, like, antithetical to what I feel like Republicans stand for. That's my soapbox. And I get that there's, like,
you could let this guy respond.
Yeah, well, so I voted for. I mean, it kind of goes back to what Marcus was saying that, I was at a forum, I guess 2 weeks ago, and so at this forum was myself. It was Ben Loring, who's a Democrat from District 7, I guess, Ben. So, and then it was Senator Shaw, and a guy brought up, one of my constituents brought up at the end. He said, you guys have the House, you have the Senate, you have the governor, and it is so jumbled up there. And I took offense to that and he was talking about expansion, he was talking about education, some things, and I said, and this was a guy that I've known my whole life, and so rural district, they have no issues coming up and telling me how they feel, and I like that. I want to hear, but I said I take that point's not well taken, because I talked about the relationship. Ben sat there and said we have the best session he's had in his 5 years, and I said, there's always a stigma. Republicans don't like poor people. Well, that's not the case, because I was born and raised poor my whole life. I mean, I was talking about that my house it's 300 square foot, smaller than my garage, and so I just think that went back to kind of like what Marcus was saying. You can require with waivers some skin in the game. So that's how I looked at it. And I know we had the conversation Friday. There was another physician there. I think it was a surgeon, a neurosurgeon maybe, and talked about, and he was kind of like you're a really progressive Democrat, but he said, I don't think anything should be free.
Sure.
We should require something from people, for this benefit. And so that was my outlook on it. And as far as the state question, I was, after the 788 passed on the ballot, I was one of the lucky ones that got put on this, bipartisan House and Senate, task force, if you will, and that actually became a committee that we passed legislation out of this year. But
788 being that medical marijuana.
Yeah. But you've seen how that thing was rushed through. I mean, and we had experts coming in from all these other states, from Colorado, California, all these states, in Oregon, that had passed some form of medicinal marijuana, and that's the biggest hiccup was the timeline. Within 30 days, the healthcare department had to promulgate rules. Within 30 days, we had to begin accepting applications. 30 days after that, we had to begin actually issuing the licenses, the permits for the card holders, and so huge. I mean, it was a headache, and so it's going to be. I was talking to a guy from California, and he was a physician that was there testifying, and I said, "Well, how long did it take you all to get your medicinal marijuana program right?" And he said, "We haven't. 25 years later, we're still passing legislation on this." And so, same thing with 780 and 781. My wife's a mental health therapist, and of course, as elected officials, we don't get out and make a lot of hard comments on state questions, because we can't. You really ethically, you can't influence an election. But you can give your opinion. But my wife would say, as a mental health provider, this ideal that with 780, the money that you're supposedly going to save for treatment programs, it's not going to happen. It costs so much more money than you guys are thinking. But that was a good sell. And you've seen when we tried to go and just add one statute back. And so when you're talking about, I know this, it's state questions are political, and the groups that push them, they obviously have an agenda, but they did strip the language from it. They put statutes in there. And so we tried to add one statute back, and I don't remember how you voted on it.
Drug-free school zones.
Yeah,
I voted for it.
Yeah, within that state question, they did away with drug-free school zones. And I didn't have a constituent that came up to me and said they knew about it. I didn't have a superintendent that knew about it. Yeah. So we tried to add one statute back that said you can't have drugs in school zone. Now, it wasn't a witch hunt, so we put protections in there where if you were traveling through a school zone and you're pulled over by a law enforcement officer, they cannot charge you with a felony. If you're a student, of course, you're not going to be charged with a felony. If you're a welding student, an adult, a 50-year-old welding student at a VOTEC, you're not going to be charged with a felony. It just gave the DA's discretion. If you are caught with on school grounds or whatever, sure, gave them discretion to charge with a felony or use deferred sentence or drug courts. Sure. And people lost. I mean, I voted for it. People lost their mind. I remember the Tulsa World put an article out, and it said the arrogant legislators think that you are ignorant, basically. And so, that goes against people said even people that did not support it on the ballot were saying, how dare you go against the will of people? This was a state question that passed. And so that's another, like Mark mentioned before with this, with a state question, it's dangerous to, if you do, in the event that you do find out something that's not working, but it's hard to go make those changes. So,
and I think it's important to note that we will act on Medicaid. Mm-hmm. We will. I mean, I'm disappointed we didn't do it earlier, but I think that we have a governor who's still in a massive learning curve. Yeah. And he was focused on what he was focused on.
Sure.
And I think that he's going to be brought up to speed this summer. And I mean, I don't know for sure, but if he wants to, he can call a special.
Well, I was going to ask because he kind of referenced that and said it wasn't off the table.
No, I don't think it is.
Scott and I are both texting each other like, "Oh, really?"
Well, I think even Senator McCourtney had a tweet about it. Then I was like, I was like, this is a guy who would know, and he's acting like something might happen.
Well, that's a rumor. I think it will, but I don't think that Governor Stitt will call a special unless we have every side in agreement. We're in for 4 days and we're out.
Right. They want to have one of those like 5-month-long special sessions.
As co-host of a weekly podcast that covers the legislative session, if you guys could not have a long special session,
hey, Scott Fagetter slept on my floor for a year. In special session, so
on a blow-up mattress.
Well, when we started doing this podcast, we were like, okay, during the session we'll do weekly updates, and then in the off season we'll do educational topics, and then literally we had 17 months of session, and both Scott and I were like, I just want a week off.
Okay, you're not the only one.
Yeah, I'm sure.
When I really contemplate and think about those, our first 2 years of Josh and I in office, my eyes well up because it was awful.
I cannot imagine.
It was awful.
Well, and to be not from Oklahoma City Metro and to have young kids, and so that you were away from your family.
I mean, you're like 4 hours away, right?
About 3 hours, 3.5, depending on traffic in Tulsa on the way home. But
you have four kids.
I've got 4 kids, So I was looking at, so they're 12, 11, 6, and 4. And when we first got elected, they were, whatever, 8 or 9 and 8 and 3 and 2. And so my wife was a very, very successful, strong, independent business person who is used to working 60, 80 hours a week. But I remember after that first month, just normal session, my kids were used to me never missing anything. And so it was a huge learning curve for our family. And so that's who's, in order for us to do this job, you got to have a strong marriage, strong spouse. And I remember, that first couple of weeks, I didn't want to go home because she was so. At one point, I said, I actually typed up a resignation letter, signed it, and I put it in an envelope and stuck a stamp on it. Said, "If you're that sick of it, put this in the mail because this isn't worth it."
Right.
So
it's and the thing is that doesn't change. I mean, even being reelected and back in office, it's still super hard. And I'm not wanting everybody to think, hey, these guys are so mistreated or whatever.
Right.
But it is a true sacrifice, and I mean both sides of the aisle. To do this job because you leave money on the table. Your family, you don't get to see them very much, and they sacrifice a lot. And I just always just tell my wife, thank you.
Right.
I mean,
well, my time's not worth money. I'm obviously, and neither is yours. But to do this, I personally got to feel like that I'm getting something accomplished because I don't want to come up here and fill a seat,
right?
Ever. And so you have to. I got to feel like that we are moving the needle, and I think that was the kind of the outlook. Our whole class that came in together, most of us just said, "Hey, let's do some things that haven't been done before, and let's make some votes. And if we get primary and get beat or beat in an election, who cares?"
Well, I think that we came in and we'd been on the doorsteps and we had seen the dysfunction and the gridlock, and we came in as now we're sophomores. We came in and we said, "Look, we're going to govern. That we are going to manage this state. We are going to govern." And that's why I think Governor Stitt is such a breath of fresh air, because they're willing to look at government differently.
Right.
And it's not the way it's always been. I mean, sometimes they're looking at something and they're saying, how can we blow this up? And I mean, they'll run an idea by you or by me, and I'm just like, yeah, you can't do that. You can't do that. Well, and then they say, well, why not?
Right. They just want to find out.
Yeah.
Well, I had a conversation with Joe Dorman probably a month after session, and he was down with his nonprofit and doing something with kids there at the Capitol. I said, what do you think, Joe? What's the outlook out there outside of the bubble here? What are people telling you? He said, you know what, Wes? He said, this is it's very across the board, Republicans and Democrats, very optimistic. And he said it reminds me kind of when, I forget, it was when Governor Nye was lieutenant governor, and we had a young governor as well. And so Governor Nye was like 29 or 30, and the governor was maybe 32, 33. And he said that's the, across the board, people are just like the fact that we have a young governor, a young lieutenant governor that have kids. And so based off of, Stitt campaigned on a lot of stuff on the trail of criminal justice reform, things like that are, and education, things are important, and especially to people that are younger than have kids, and so he thought that it was going really well.
Can I just throw something in? Let's go back to Medicaid again.
Yeah.
That's actually a Republican idea.
Right.
The ACA is actually a Republican idea.
Yeah.
And I think that's lost on my cohorts.
Yes.
That was basically Romney Care. And
the socialist government takeover of healthcare that was passed in 2009 or 2010 under the Democrats originated at the Heritage Foundation.
Yeah, and let me tell you, and it's the same thing that has happened in reverse with criminal justice reform.
Yeah.
It was more of a liberal thing,
right.
and the conservatives kind of usurped it. And
Scott and I have talked about that on the show, that this year in particular, I think the Democrats in Oklahoma have had a hard go because all of their platforms, right? Criminal justice reform and Medicaid, all these things. The Republicans came in and said, here's what we're going to do. And then they were like,
Well, you got people from districts like mine, too, that were, prior to 2008, was probably 85-90% Democrat.
Right.
And so those are still, those people that are now Republicans, or even the Democrats, like I said, they're blue dog. I mean, they are conservative. There are still issues that affect, especially rural Oklahoma with the high incarceration rates. And so, I've always been a big advocate of, just because from the mental health standpoint and being military, and so from just the, seeing the veterans and the issues that they have with mental health, a lot of those end up in prison. And so, my wife being a therapist, is a huge conversation at my dinner table, and so that's been something I've pushed for. And from day one, I ran the legislation to expand the drug courts my first year, and then last year we did some stuff with the Pardon Parole Board, the 5 members, adding 2 of those 5 have to be either a mental health provider or a substance abuse provider. And so, but yeah, you're right. I mean, if you look at up top now, D.C., that Marcus was, we were talking the other day about how it's the Republicans up there fighting right now to keep ACA intact, because the Democrats are wanting to go this
Medicare for all.
Right.
And so
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've kind of been dancing around it here a little bit, so I'm just going to straight up ask the question. Okay. To the extent that you guys can comment, and we don't have to get into specific people, but I don't think it's any shock, certainly to people who listen to this show and probably to people that follow politics in Oklahoma, that the legislature looks a little bit different this year. Particularly the Republican caucus looks a little bit different. There was kind of a campaign of sorts maybe last year that kind of went after some of the more outspoken, real conservative members, I guess, if you want to
the platform caucus.
The platform caucus, and several of them aren't in the legislature anymore. And I'm just kind of curious to what extent you guys, as Republicans, feel like that has changed the dynamics, in your caucus, and what's kind of gone on what's happened at the Capitol this year.
I think that there is an overwhelming sense that we can pass anything we want to with the group of people we have there.
Yeah.
We can. I mean, the House can move policy that it wants to move, and the Republicans can actually do it by themselves.
Well, because before you still had a supermajority, but part of that faction split off and would sometimes vote with the Democrats for different reasons.
Absolutely.
But it ended up with 3 groups, and you needed a coalition to make anything happen.
Yeah, and so I believe that I think it's more relaxed, more of a focus on governing and actually doing something, because we have the revenue to do some more things.
Right.
It's night and day.
Well, yeah, not having to cut again, right?
Yeah, and not having to deal with a faction that is obstructionist.
Sure.
That was the way it kind of was looked at, as obstructionist. Man, like I said, when I remember probably March of 2017, our first session, Leslie Osborne was the A&B chair, and a group of us went to talk to Leslie and said, hey, we knew that there was revenue was off the table. We were 76 votes, but we started saying, hey, as the A&B chair, give us some projects, give us something to go look up. And so she did. She went and she said, I want you to look at this and this and this and this, and you tell me if it's going to work, if we get some revenue. And it made it's no secret that I had a riff with a few of them. I think the Ogle put me in there, and they did I'll say your response. So the Ogle did a report and said I was auditioning for an Ogle writer, but that was early on, and a former member in his blog I call it. He kind of headed up that. I don't know if we're going to talk names or I don't
just
drop his
say
name.
a former member who was a blogger.
Yeah, former member. So he put out an article and it said the freshman class was pawns, Leslie's pawns. We took
pawns of leadership.
We took exception
that's
to
right.
that. Absolutely.
And so Representative McEntire has a pawn lapel pin there that
I love it.
he wears with pride.
We all do.
Yeah.
We all do. And
we had ceremonies for that. It was an initiation process.
We did. It was kind of military.
I gave
style
him
for
blood.
the guys.
I gave him blood rank. But we did. We got together. It became actually this. It brought our group together because call me what you. I don't care what you call me. They have called me Rhino. They called me. One guy called me the Maxine Waters of Oklahoma, and I'm like, no, I'm not. I am still a Republican. I'm still conservative.
Did he know who Maxine Waters is?
I don't know if he.
I wonder if he knew.
I would assume. But we came in. I think we had this. We were pragmatic. I'm still Republican. I'm still conservative. I still have conservative values. But we came in looking for solutions, and because I didn't want to go through the same crap that they did. Because of these, we're going to have another downfall at some point. We're such a commodity-based state, but they were afraid to make decisions. That was kind of our outlook, not whether they were or not. And so we kind of took offense to that, and I commented on his tweet, and I said, "Well, that's big words from someone who doesn't participate." And of all people, Corey Williams, a Democrat colleague,
you can say it.
he gets on there and he's defending this guy. And I'm like, "What? You can't tell me you agree with anything that this guy says." And so anyway, we kind of went back and forth, and Randy Crable I made a comment to Corey that probably shouldn't have, but Randy Crable puts it on the front page of Tulsa World. And he was talking about how times have changed. You have people debating, politicians on social media.
Right.
And so, and it just escalated from there. You had members of that certain sect of Republicans that were going to groups in Tulsa talking about the formation of this, but they talked about how they would work with Democrats to kill Republican bills. You had another member that was going up there and saying we need to recruit people to run against these rhinos. And then I had people like John Mitchell in my district. And so I'm Delaware County. If you come up in there looking, it's a rural, it's a farming community. Mm-hmm. And so he's obviously someone from down here that kind of looks hippie-ish, sandals. And so he was in my hometown saying, your representative here is a rhino. You need to get somebody run against this guy. And so I remember getting up after he spoke before my GOP, and I said, well, I appreciate him for being here. He's very passionate about what he does. I see him often at the Capitol. But as you can tell by this it was called the Platform Index. As you can tell by my score he gave me out of these hundreds of bills that we've voted on, and he wants to pick 10 bills out, that I didn't put two thoughts of what he was going to say about me. And I went through each one. One of them was a tourism incentive. We're Grand Lake. I'm going to vote for a tourism incentive every time. One of them was an aerospace incentive. Well, that's my industry. My industrial park is an aerospace industrial park. One of them, they called it socialized grocery. And that's the bill that we passed. I think it was the Dawn's bill. It was if you have unopened food from school, you don't have to throw it away. You can give it to a kid. So that was socialized groceries. So I went through each one.
It was ridiculous.
And explained to them.
Ridiculous.
So you had that, and then you had the whole. It just kept escalating. So it became this. You just get pushes into the corner, and then you had the big press conference, and after the press conference up there, there was a member coming down the hallway, and I said, hey, if this is if you want to start a civil war, brother, I'll thrive in this environment, and I'll go to your district, and I'll beat you in your own district. I'll hold up signs. And so, they're in a process. I went, there was an article put out about me on one of the political blogs, and it was totally fabricated. And so, but I remember I turned around. I wasn't screaming and acting crazy. I mean, I am militant, but I have candor and I have bearing. And so I turned around and I went down the hall, and I was on the edge of the rotunda, and I got to Florida Eccles hallway there, and I turned around. He was behind me, and he puts his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "Is it your PTSD, West?" And it's the wrong thing to say. And so I told him what I thought about it. And I wasn't threatening him, but he runs to the Highway Patrol and says, "Hey, you got to get West." I'm scared for my life and my family's life, and the funny thing about it is the trooper, and there was additional troopers there because of it was right when the teacher walked out was ramping up. But he said, "Heck no, I'm not going after one of my own." And so then next thing you know, I'm at the big
conspiracy. Right.
Yeah.
Did you witness this?
Yes. I just think what I would say is we're disagreeing a lot better.
Sure.
We're not nearly as polarized.
Well, it doesn't feel like everything, like you can disagree without like despising the person for who they are, which is
and without running out with a press release, engendering ill will and things like that. We haven't had that this year.
Yeah.
I mean, Floor Leader Virgin and the Democrats, of course, they're raising concerns about our budget. I wouldn't expect them to do anything else. But I think that if you were to get them off the record and they would say, this is pretty dang good. This is pretty dang good. And so, I mean, I think most of Oklahoma sits somewhere in the middle. I mean, a normal distribution curve.
Yeah.
And you've got 80% of the people somewhere in the middle. And they do not want us to be dysfunctional. They want us to get stuff done. And I think this year has been a great year for seeing how Republicans and Democrats can actually work together and both get their ideas passed. I don't know how many Democratic bills we passed this year, but it's quite a few. I think Jason Dunnington had 6 at least that were signed by the governor.
Yeah.
And so...
and they're not doing anything out of the ordinary. When Republicans were in the monitor, when there was 80 Democrats, Republicans did the same thing.
Yeah.
And so it's just the roles flipped. And,
So kind of on that note, maybe let's end with hearing from you guys what you feel like the biggest accomplishment of the legislature has been this year. This could be individually for you guys or just in general. What do you think has been the biggest accomplishment?
Well, I think that some of the tough votes that we made over the previous 2 years have definitely helped the economy. And so that's something that I'm proud of, that we helped move the state forward. I'm proud that we have invested in education. It may not be perfect in what everybody wants down here or everybody wants throughout the state, but you got to admit that we made a commitment and we made a huge investment last year. We continue to do that. We also are being, from a conservative standpoint, we are trying to put money back as well. Because like I said earlier, we know that we're going to, at some point, with just being a commodity-based state, we're going to end up in another downfall. And so I think it's smart to put money back. But I'm proud of what we've done. I think it's a work of it's the overall work that we've done over the past 3 years. And then, like I said, I was glad that there'll be some reform come out, criminal justice reform that comes out. That is common sense reform. That's not some, that's not just way out there. We're not going to let everybody out of prison at once. But I think there's some of the things that we're going to run through this week and that will help address the issues we have. And from a fiscally conservative standpoint, will help. It costs $27,000 a year to keep somebody in prison. So I'm proud of that, and I'm proud of the investment that we made. And, the overall work of the body of work, I think, is what I'm proud of. And my colleagues, relationships, if we didn't have the relationships, honestly, it would be tough to deal with just the constant. I'm not trying to be like Marcus was talking about earlier. I'm not saying that we have this, we're victims. No, but it kind of, you get sick of the putting up with, some of the stuff. And so to have the relationships that were built, both Republicans and Democrats. And so that's definitely, I think that people are seeing us argue and disagree a lot better and still get to move the state forward as Republicans and Democrats.
Sure. I think any victories we've had this year are a product of an improving economy and the votes that we made last year to actually, bite the bullet as Republicans and pass some revenue. And so, to me, I think giving over $200 million over $200 million into education is a huge deal. We weren't lying when we said that. We care about education too as Republicans. We care about public education, especially us guys from rural Oklahoma. Yeah. We don't have private schools, and so we care deeply about public education. But then on a more of a healthcare note, because that's my lane. I have 3 lanes. I've got insurance, alcohol policy, and healthcare. And what we've done with healthcare this year, kind of as a function of FMAP, which is the federal medical payments that the feds are giving us, right. And so it's based on a 3-year rolling average. So we got a lot more money this year. So we're putting some of that back, but we're also giving a 5% provider rate increase to healthcare professionals.
God bless you.
Yes. Yeah. And so that
collusion
was that was one of my big goals, and we did that, and we're going to get another bump in FMAP next year, another 1.22%. So we're going to save some more, and we're also going to give it another provider rate increase. And so, and hopefully by then we'll have increased access to healthcare, and then we won't necessarily be hunky-dory because there'll be more problems that crop up in healthcare. But I'm really proud of what we've done in healthcare, especially with nursing homes. And I know that some people in the medical world are, a little upset that nursing homes got a sweet deal, but their outcomes suck.
Yeah.
And we've got to do something.
Totally.
Also, McCourtney had that pharmacy management.
That was
bill.
me too.
Was that you too?
Yeah. Governor signed today, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
signed 2632.
That's a big
Congrats
deal.
on that.
It
It's a
had
big
it
deal.
had it had Fuller Eccles' name on it, but I was the guy.
Was
If you're listening, John.
Was step therapy reform? Was that you too?
Yeah, I was a co-author on it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, the last thing I'll have, we very much appreciate you guys coming to the studio today and sitting down with us. Andy and I have often talked about taking the podcast on the road. If we come to HD5 or HD50, you guys
Hey, absolutely.
pick
I will
a
take
spot.
let's go to Shangri-La.
I mean,
Yeah.
heck, we're politicians. We're gonna always want to talk.
Right.
So
Well, I've talked to Marcus about doing the little politicians in cars getting coffee or one of those things.
Have you guys
So-
ever
Heck
been
yeah.
to Grand Lake?
I've never had.
I have been to Grand Lake once.
Can we do it in a boat?
I was much,
Yes.
yeah,
Boatcast.
absolutely.
The Cherokee
Yes.
Queen. The Cherokee
well,
Queen.
we could, but
Okay.
how about we just do it on the dock? We'll go to Dr. Cox is my predecessor. I don't know if you remember Cox.
Sure,
He
yeah.
served for 12
I'll
years.
do it on his pier.
We'll do it
Yeah.
on his dock. He's my neighbor, and so he would love to.
That sounds like a summer summer road trip.
We'll give you guys a quick break from session to get reacquainted with your families, but
Yeah.
we're gonna make this happen.
yeah.
Yeah, it'll be
Hey,
fun.
come on, do it.
Excellent. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks
we
for
look
having
forward
us.
to
Thank you for having us.
seeing you this summer.
Absolutely.
Anyway, hey, we're back. Thanks to Representative Josh West and Marcus McEntire for being here on this episode. Great to visit with you guys. We look forward to maybe finding some time this summer to visit with them in their home districts.
Yes, we're planning an excursion.
A lake pod.
And, lake pod.
What's
I like it.
what's the little lily pads? Lily pods? Could be a lily pod.
No,
All right, fine.
veto.
Veto.
I'm 50% of this show. I veto it.
I need one more person. All right. Well, on that note, that brings us to the end of this episode. Thanks so much for joining us. As a reminder, on Saturday, June 15th, that's in 2 weeks, we're going to have Civic Saturday. It's going to be a super awesome event from 10:30 to noon here in Oklahoma City at the Paramount Room, the Paramount Theater on Film Row. Go to our website, letsfixthisok.org/calendar, and you'll see it on there. There'll also be an email going out next week, and you'll see it on social media. You can get it on our Facebook page, facebook.com/letsfixthisok. It's going to be great. It's kind of like a church service, but about civic life and about be civically engaged. Gonna have some poets. Gonna have some music. Gonna have a quote civic sermon from the guy that runs this national organization called Citizen University. This event is co-hosted by us, Generation Citizen, Citizen University, and the Office of Mayor David Holt. Should be very exciting. Be sure to rate our podcast and share it with your friends. This summer, Scott and I are going to do a bunch of series. We mentioned one about healthcare, one about criminal justice reform, some about redistricting. We've got some really exciting things happening this summer. We'd love for you to listen in and find out more about it so that when we come back in to session next year, you can really be informed and have new ways to be engaged. Don't forget to look up your legislators and try to connect with them outside the Capitol as well.
Remember, maybe not like today, but like these next few months is the time to do it, right?
Yeah,
like when they're not in session, that's the off season. That's the time to train. That's the time to build relationships, make your voice heard. Don't wait until they come back in February.
That's right. Decisions are made by those who show up.
So show up now.
Have a good week, everybody.